A cross section of, think of kind of midway between the knee and the ankle, about midway. And so we're breaking this leg lower section up into 3 compartments: the anterior, which would be the front of the leg, the lateral and posterior. And so the lateral would be the outermost part of the leg. So we're considering this is the right leg. And in the center here, I'm going to highlight in green, is the tibia. That's the T and the fibia, right? Those are the 2 bones. So it gives you some point of reference for what we're going to label in. And so we're talking about the anterior. In the anterior, we have 4 muscles. And so in these 4 muscles, we're going to start with the outermost. I'm going to call that 1. This is the tibialis, I-A-L-I-S. Anterior, T-I-B-I-A-L. It just ran together. That looks stupid. I'm going to fix it. L-I-S. Gosh, let's just start all over. L-I-S. Anterior, A-N-T-E-R-I-O-R. That makes sense because it's the anterior, right? And then working inward, so deep to the tibialis anterior, we have another muscle. And that muscle has 2 names. It starts with an F. So F, can you think of it? Fibularis terrarius. Okay, so we're going to write that down. It's also known as the peroneus, but I'm going to write fibularis T-E-R, tertius, also known as peroneus, P-E-R-O-N-E-O-U-S, peroneus. Okay, and so if we work inward from that, deep to fibularis tertius, we have the extensor, what? Hallucis longus. L-U-C-I-U-S. Longus. It's hard to write and talk and think at the same time. L-O-N-G-U-S. Where we got it. So extensor longus, and then deep to that, we have the extensor S-O-R. What? Starts with a D. D-I-G. Digitorum. Longus. All right. And we want to consider what nerve innervates this anterior section. And so I'm going to put that in green. The nerve is, think deep, fibular. Deep fibular. And the artery that meets in with this is what? It's the anterior section, so think anterior. Tibial. T-I-B-I-A-L. Okay. So we've got that section taken care of. Let's move on to the lateral section. So inside the lateral section, we would have what? And there's 2. So I'm going to make those red. 1, we'd have the fibularis, L-A-R-I-S, longus, fibularis U-S, longus. That looks terrible. I'm going to rewrite it. U-S, and this is also known as the peroneus, P-E-R-O-N-I-U-S, longus. So we have a peroneus longus, and what else? Number 2 muscles. Fibularis, this should be pretty easy. F-I-B-U-L-A-R-I-S, peroneus, also known as peroneus. What? There's the long one and there's a brevis one. Brevis, peroneus brevis. That's in the lateral compartment. Now let's consider the innervation. How's that innervated? This is the superficial fibular peroneal, also known as peroneal nerve. So superficial fibular peroneal. There you go, peroneal. So peroneal kind of fits in everywhere here, and the artery that feeds these muscles is the fibular. ULAR, fibular artery. Okay. And the final section, we're going posterior. So there's 5 muscles. Ooh, heavens, no, there's 7 muscles in this group. And I'm going to try and keep them in order inside the leg. So the most internal is popliteus. So that's the most, it's the little guy. It's popliteus. And that, what does that do? Popliteus unlocks the knee, allows the knees to bend. Popliteus. Hello. Okay, thank you. So popliteus, I have to wrap up quickly here. We've got 15 minutes. Popliteus is the innermost, right? It's very small. And then next to popliteus, so moving outward, we'd have plantaris. Plantaris. So I'm going to mark that 1, 2. Those are plantaris. And then what do we have? Bigger muscle. 3. I'm going to turn my hand a little bit. So these are a little bigger, and this is one of them is the flexor digitorum longus. Okay, so we're going to make that 3. Flexor digitorum longus. Moving outward farther, we have the tibialis posterior, tib-I-L-I-S, posterior, posterior. So that's, I'm going to say 4. And then we have, I'm trying to kind of keep these in an area that they are in, so just a little more medial. We're going to go flexor hallucis longus, US longus, and I'll call that 5. And then we have the solus, so we're moving outward, and the most superficial, oops, this would be 6, and the most superficial, the largest of all of them, the gastroc, or gastrocnemius, CHNEMIUS. And we want to make sure we've got these innervated. So innervation goes tibial nerve is innervating, and what artery would feed the posterior section, the posterior tibial? So let's write that in. Posterior tibial, posterior tibial. Now I'm going to give a quick review so you can think through this if you're on a drive like me. I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to do a little highlighting too, just because I think that helps these stand out. So let's find a nice, we'll try that color. Okay, so we're considering the leg. We're in about the midsection of the leg. We have the tibia, the fibia. We're considering the right leg. Let's talk anterior first. So in the anterior, we have 4 muscles, 4 main muscles. In the most superficial, right, closest to the surface, in the anterior, would be the tibialis anterior, tib anterior. Moving inward, deep to tibialis anterior, we would have the fibularis tertius, also known as the peroneus. Okay? And then we have the extensor hallucis longus, and then the extensor digitorum longus. So what letters are those? Well, let's put those in teal. deal. If we're trying to do work on an acronym in the anterior section, we would have tibialis anterior, fibularis, TF, E extensor hallucis longus, so I'm going to say H, and digitorum longus. So I would go with TFHD. Tibialis, fibularis, hallucis, and digitorum would be the 4. TFHD in the anterior section. Okay, now let's talk lateral section. The lateral section, we would have 2 muscles. Now, this is pretty simple. Lateral side, fibularis longus, fibularis brevis, long and short, also known as peroneus. I didn't like that highlight. So also known as peroneus, brevis, peroneus longus. These are innervated by what? The superficial fibular nerve, also known as the peroneal. And the artery that runs to that area, the fibular artery. So very simple. You can tell because the fibular artery is close to the fibula, right? Pretty simple. Also in that anterior section, we would want to ask what is the nerve that runs the anterior section. That's the deep fibular. And what's the artery? So that's pretty simple too. Anterior matches up, anterior tibial. Okay, so we have all those taken care of in our last section. Our last section comes to the posterior portion of the right leg, and we have 7 muscles in this section. 7 muscles in this section. So let's talk here. We have number 1, most inward part by the fibula, the popliteus. What does the popliteus do? It unlocks the knee. And moving outward, we have the plantaris. If we move outward, we have the flexor digitorum longus. And we move outward, we have a tibialis posterior, and then a little more medial, right, to the leg. Moving outward, we have the flexor hallucis longus, and then further out, we have the soleus, which is a pretty large muscle, and then the largest muscle of the whole lower leg, the gastrocnemius. And what innervates that area, that posterior area? The tibial nerve, and the artery that runs there is what? The posterior tibial artery. And you have nailed it. And I'm gonna undo all of our highlights there so it's nice and clean. And wrap this up. So that is a full review. I hope this helps. Of the left leg, the leg about midway between the knee and the ankle, and we're looking at the right leg.